You know the feeling. I mean, you really know it. You're in the shower, driving to work, maybe just staring out the window. And then, suddenly, you're gone. You're just completely lost in a detailed, imaginary scenario playing out inside your own head. And when you finally snap back to reality, there's this weird feeling, right? It's like a mix of relief, but also maybe a little disappointment. Because for that one moment, what was happening in your mind felt more vivid, more real than your actual life. So what's the deal with that? Let's dive in and decode what's actually happening in our brains.
So what is this habit, really? A lot of people just write it off as daydreaming, but it's so much more than that. This is your brain on a mission. It's actively trying to solve something by building these incredible alternate realities.
I mean, does any of this sound familiar? You're replaying an old argument, but this time you have the perfect comeback. Or you're rehearsing this amazing speech for a moment that's probably never going to happen. Maybe you're imagining getting that promotion, that recognition you feel you really deserve. These aren't just random thoughts. They're deeply, deeply human, and they're incredibly common.
Look, the most important thing to get right off the bat is this. If you do this, you are not broken. You're not weird. You are not wasting your life. This is a fundamental feature of how the human brain works. It's doing precisely what it evolved to do. So let's get into the why. Why does our brain do this? Well, there's some really fascinating science behind it. And probably the best way to think about it is this. Your brain is running its own super advanced flight simulator. Okay, so this whole process is driven by a part of our brain called the default mode network, or the DMN. It's the network that lights up when your mind isn't focused on a task in the outside world. But for people who get really lost in these scenarios, the DMN isn't just, idly wandering. It is actively building these incredibly detailed alternate worlds.
Psychologists have a term for this process. They call it counterfactual thinking. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It just means your brain is running what-if scenarios. It's exploring different versions of reality to learn from the past, prepare for the future, and just make sense of everything.
And that brings us back to our flight simulator idea. Just like a pilot uses a simulator to practice for turbulence or an engine failure without any actual risk, your brain runs these mental scenarios to test out responses, build confidence, and prepare you for all of life's messy, unexpected moments. But, and this is a big but, here's where it gets complicated. There's a very fine line between this being a helpful rehearsal and it becoming a mental trap that keeps you from living your actual life. So why do we get stuck there? Well, the deepest reason usually comes down to one thing, a craving for control. Think about it. In the real world, you can't control how people react or what happens next. But inside your mind, you're the director. You get to say the perfect thing. You get to win the argument. And your brain absolutely loves that feeling of control. But there's a cost to this, a real one. The more time you spend in that perfectly scripted inner world, the wider the gap becomes between it and your real life. You might even start to prefer the simulation, because real life is so unpredictable, it doesn't follow your script. And this brings us to the single most important distinction you need to make for yourself. Ask yourself, are you preparing or are you protecting? Preparing is when you mentally rehearse a difficult conversation you actually plan to have. Protecting is when you rehearse it over and over again specifically to avoid ever having it. One leads to action, the other leads to hiding. So how do we handle this? What do we do? The goal isn't to stop creating these scenarios. You can't, really. The goal is to take control of them. So let's walk through a practical, 4-step toolkit that can help you navigate that inner world a lot more effectively.
The 4 steps are actually pretty simple, but they're powerful. First, you externalize the scenario. Second, you ask that critical question, preparing or protecting. Third, you set a time limit. And fourth, you ground yourself. Let's break down what each of these actually looks like.
Okay, step 1, externalize. When you feel yourself stuck in a mental loop, just grab a notebook and write the whole thing down. Get it out of your head and onto the page. This simple act tells your brain, okay, got it, message received. It actually completes the processing loop, so your mind can finally let it go instead of replaying it forever.
Step 2 is to ask that crucial question we talked about. Am I preparing for action or am I protecting myself from discomfort? Seriously, just learning to recognize the difference between the two gives you this immense power to choose what you do next.
All right, number 3, set a time limit. You don't have to completely banish these scenarios. Instead, just contain them. Give yourself, say, 10 minutes to fully explore it, and then, when the time is up, you make a conscious choice to come back to the present. This trains your brain to understand that this inner world is a place you can visit, but it's not where you live.
And finally, step 4. Ground yourself. This is so simple. When you notice you've drifted away, just gently bring your attention back to your body. Feel your feet flat on the floor. Notice the feeling of your breath going in and out. This simple physical awareness literally pulls your brain out of that hyperactive default mode network and brings you right back into the here and now.
So, to bring this all together, let's end with one final, really powerful way to think about this entire process.
Think of your mind as a river, and all these scenarios, these thoughts, are the current. You can't stop the river from flowing, and honestly, you shouldn't even try. The real skill is learning how to not get swept away by it. You learn to sit on the bank, watch the thoughts go by, and then you get to choose where you want to walk. In the end, that's what these scenarios are. They're tools. They are simulations, not replacements for your life. They are just your mind's incredible, sometimes clumsy, attempt to protect you, prepare you, and make sense of a very, very complicated world.
Which leaves us all with one final question. Your real life is waiting for you. It's messy, it's uncertain, and it absolutely never follows a script. But maybe, just maybe, that's enough.